Alright everyone, before we get to building, we've got to learn some of the science behind the glider plane. But here's the deal, aerospace can be pretty tricky. It's complex stuff, so although we're going to cover some of those harder topics, what we really want to focus on are some of the basics. I don't know about you, but I always used to wonder, how the heck do some of those big planes and heavy planes fly, and fly so fast? So those are the type of questions we're going to get you answered, and many more. So stay tuned and let's dive right into it. We've covered what a force is in previous projects, but as a quick reminder, it's pretty much just a push or a pull against something. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of moving parts in airplanes, so naturally there's a lot of forces. There's four main ones that we really need to focus on, and the first one is the simplest. It's the gravitational force. Airplanes are obviously big and they're heavy, and they really are weighed down, so the gravitational force is really high on them. If you want some context, I'm about 180 pounds, so it doesn't take much to lift me off the ground. But a commercial airplane, on the other hand, is about 175,000 pounds. So it's really up to those other forces that lift it up to generate at least that much force to get it off the ground. We'll get to those in a second. Force number two, and the second force that really slows planes down, is called the drag force. And we've also kind of explored this one before, back in the egg drop project. If you remember, we explored how the shape of whatever it is that's flowing through the air has to be really aerodynamic in nature and help flow nice and smoothly through it instead of catching a bunch of air. A quick example of that is, have you ever stuck your hand out a car window? If you do it like this, you can kind of glide it nice and smooth, but as soon as you flip your hand this way, it catches the air and goes back. So drag force can be super pesky, and that's why there's teams of people dedicated solely to try to reduce it on airplanes. Here's the equation for drag force, and if you notice that A in it, that's what those teams do. They try to manipulate the shape of the airplane so the air flows nice and smooth over it. And that way, if the air flows nice and smooth, the plane glides smoother, it takes less fuel, and since fuel's so expensive, cheaper plane tickets. It's a win-win for us all, and that's part of the reason why the drag force is so important. Is drag always bad though? How about when planes are trying to land? That's when it comes in handy, when you really want to slow the plane down for a nice smooth landing so you don't come in too fast. So that's part of why it's tricky. They have to control it throughout the whole flight. So all these forces kind of have to work together, right? We talked about what brings the plane down and what holds the plane back. Well, how about what thrusts the plane forward? And that's actually a word. It's called the thrust force. And on normal airplanes, it's the giant jet engines on the side which provide the thrust and propel the plane forward. In our case, we're going to be relying on our hands to produce the thrust for a nice smooth flight. But thrust alone stands no chance to overcome drag and gravity. For liftoff, we need what's called the lift force to complete the puzzle. Lift force is the tricky one, so try to bear with me here. But this is what's called an airfoil, and it's the shape of an airplane's wing from a side view. How they work is they bring the air that comes underneath the wing much slower than the air up top. And since it's slower air down here, it also has a much higher pressure than the air on top. In case you didn't know, objects want to move from a zone of high pressure to a zone of low pressure. Just like this water bottle cap trying to escape the high pressure zone that was created by squeezing that water bottle. So believe it or not, that's how airplanes are able to take off and maintain flight, is from the upward force generated from being sucked up into the low pressure zone from the high pressure air beneath the wing. There's some pretty serious math that goes on behind lift force, and it all relates to what's called Bernoulli's principle, which we'll throw on the side of the screen. And there's no need to master it, but we just wanted to introduce it to you and relay its importance. In case you want to Google it, you'll find some pretty cool activities and neat things on it. So those are the basics behind flight, friends. As soon as the thrust and lift force outnumber the gravitational and drag force, that's when we get takeoff. We're also going to be leaving you with some fun, useful vocabulary at the end of this video. In case you run into something you don't recognize, go pay that a visit and see if you can get anything cleared up. Also, in case you want to learn about how some of the jet engines we were talking about work, or learn about some of the cool materials they're building planes with nowadays, schedule a Zoom call. We'd love to teach you a little bit more about those and chat about how they work. So thank you for tuning in, and be sure to tune in to the next video where you get to learn how to build one of these for yourself. Have a good one, guys.